Hi friends, it's Heather and I am back today with another book review. I just finished reading Death at a Scottish Wedding by Lucy Connelly. This is the second book in the Scottish Isle Mystery series. I read the first one not too long ago. The first book is called An American in Scotland. I just looked over my Goodreads review because I didn't make a video review of that book because I hadn't started this channel yet. And I gave the first book 3 stars. I will give this book 3.5 stars. Unfortunately, Goodreads, where I keep track of my ratings, does not allow us to give half stars. But I'll tell you guys that I would give it 3.5. I did like this book better than the first one. And looking over the written review that I posted on Goodreads at the time that I read the first book, I have basically the exact same complaints or things that I didn't like about this book. But before I get into that, I'll just kind of give you the general idea. So this series is about a Dr. Amelia McRae who moves to Scotland, and I don't know, they don't really talk about it being an island, but it's called Sea Isle is the town that she lives in. But I don't know if they ever actually mention that it's on an island. It kind of sounds like it isn't, so I don't know why it's called a Scottish Isle mystery, but there are a lot of islands in Scotland, so who knows. She moves to this small town in Scotland, and one of the things I said that I didn't like in the first book was that it was kind of unrealistic. Like, they pay for everything for her. They give her this amazing 500-year-old church, which is totally renovated into like basically a completely modern hospital inside, and also her house. So like that part was kind of far-fetched, like, come on. And her assistant Abigail, who is a nurse, medical assistant, record keeper, pharmacist, housekeeper, stocks her groceries in her kitchen. She does everything. I also felt was a little unrealistic. And then the town laird and constable, Ewan, he's like independently wealthy somehow. I don't know if it's family money, but he runs the whole town. He runs the police force. He owns a couple of castles. Again, sort of unrealistic, but I do like the characters in these books, and I did say in my review of the first book, An American in Scotland, that I would happily read the second book if another book comes out, which it did. In the first book, it's basically just introducing Dr. Amelia and how she moved to Scotland from Seattle. She used to be an emergency room physician, and it talks about that she was widowed, but that her husband, although he was a nice guy, like something wasn't great with their marriage or something even before he died. And she also didn't have like good relationships with her family or something. I can't really remember. But by the end of this book, which is only 3 months after she arrived in Scotland, she says she feels like Sea Isle, where she lives now, is her home, and that she's as close as she can possibly be with the friends she's made there and everything. Part of her duties as town doctor in this town of Sea Isle, Scotland, is that she's also the coroner. So that's kind of how they bring the mystery thing into it, is that there's always a murder or an unexplained death or an unattended death or something that she has to deal with. And so she has to go into her role as the coroner, even more so than as the doctor. Now, she does do a lot of regular doctoring too throughout the books, but the coroner part of her job is usually the thing that's most involved with whatever the mystery is for the book. Now, in this one, it centers around her friend Angie, who is getting married. And Angie's kind of into punk and goth and everything. And so the wedding is set at the end of October, kind of around Halloween time. And she's marrying a guy named Damien, who's from a very wealthy and somewhat famous family, apparently. The wedding is going to be held at this church next to a castle, which Ewan, the town constable, owns. Their friend Jasper, who's the town baker, is making their wedding cake. And her friend Mara, who works at the pub and lives above the pub, and works with her grandparents at the pub. She's helping with like the food in the kitchen and stuff. And Amelia is just supposed to be there as a guest. They all get to the castle. Well, at least some of them get to the castle ahead of time, like several days ahead of the wedding, for some other wedding activities, parties and things that they're going to have, like a stag night and a hen night and a gift opening thing and a wedding day breakfast and things like that. So there's several days of events, and she was invited to be included in that. Once that group of people, which I would say probably is like, I don't know, maybe 50 people, gets to the castle for that stuff, there's a giant snowstorm. And so they all get trapped at the castle and nobody can leave. And also there's kind of an worry the whole time that the rest of the guests, and including Angie, the bride's dad, and a whole bunch of other people from the town of Sea Isle and everything, aren't going to be able to get there for the actual wedding on the wedding day because like the roads are blocked and everything. But it does turn out okay for the wedding. The storm ends the night before the actual wedding. The wedding itself is good and goes off nice, and they have a nice wedding and a nice reception and everything. But in those several days prior to that, this somewhat smallish group of people is trapped at the castle because they're all snowed in and everything. And Dr. Amelia actually kind of witnesses and then discovers someone who has died. The weird thing is, at first, nobody knows who he is. And then later you find out he is someone that some, if not most of the people do know. But that at the very end of the book, you find out that he's actually got even more significance than what you thought throughout most of the book. So it kind of ends up being like a locked room mystery, but also it's got like kind of this creepy vibe, which does make it a pretty good book to read like at Halloween time. Being from Wisconsin in the northern U.S., we have definitely had snow on Halloween in the past. And in fact, I very distinctly remember the great blizzard of 1991 when on Halloween we got like, it's like famous how much snow there was. It was a huge blizzard. So it's not out of the realm of imagination to have a lot of snow and a blizzard on Halloween. So when this was supposed to be late October, and that's when this happens. So it's basically like several days in this castle where they're having wedding events with her friends and everything. But in the midst of all that, this mysterious person has died, and they're trying to figure out what happened to him and why he was there and who he is. And then on top of that, somebody tries to kill her, the doctor, and Angie, the bride. And nobody can figure out why. And they have no idea who it is. And so there's a whole bunch of speculation trying to figure out who would want to kill this guy and the doctor and Angie, the bride. And it almost doesn't seem connected. They go through a whole lot of theories, and they're trying to figure out, like, is this actually more than one person? Was this two completely separate, unrelated events? You know, it's very complex. It is all resolved and it is all explained. So there's a satisfying conclusion to the book, but it takes you quite a while to get there because a lot happens. Again, the things that I liked in this book, I really like the characters, and there is already a third book published, which I have on hold at the library. It hasn't come in yet, which is Death at a Scottish Christmas. So I'm hoping to read that one yet before the end of the year. And because I've really grown to like the characters, you kind of want to find out what happens with the characters and their relationships with each other and stuff like that. I like the setting, and I like the general idea of the book. I like the mystery aspect that each book has. The things I don't like are what I said earlier about how some aspects of it are fairly unbelievable or unrealistic. Now, this book had less of that than the first one. But there were still a couple things that it's kind of like, oh, come on. Like the fact that while they're trapped at the castle in the middle of the blizzard, she was still able to perform a full autopsy in the wine cellar of the castle on this dead guy. So things like that are a little bit unrealistic, but it was not as bad in this one as it was in the first one. The other thing that kind of bugs me about these books, but it's not so bad that I can't get past it, I think has to do with either the author and or the publisher or the editors. Now, the author supposedly is this woman named Lucy Connelly, but the description of her is extremely vague. It doesn't even say where she's from or where she lives. And then something I noticed in the publishing information is it actually says that it's copyright 2024 by Candace Havens. So I don't think the author's name is actually Lucy Connelly. I think that's actually a pen name, and this woman's name is actually Candace Havens. And I'm going to guess that she's actually an American. Maybe. Okay, so the other thing that kind of bugs me, and I don't know if this is her fault or if it's poor editing, it's published by Crooked Lane Books, part of the Quick Brown Fox and Company LLC in the United States. So it's published in the United States. It's not a British book. And it says Crooked Lane Books is on 27th Street in New York City. So American book, I suspect it's actually an American author. And, you know, the fact that she wrote the first book, An American in Scotland, kind of also leads me to think that she was coming from an American perspective of an American relocating to Scotland rather than a Scottish author or a UK author writing these books. Part of the reason I think that's true is I lived in the UK. I went to university in the UK, and it reads like an American trying to write like these are Scottish people. It doesn't sound authentically Scottish, but also, and this is kind of funny, sometimes it's almost like she forgets, in this book only, not the first one, it's like she forgets that her main character, Dr. Amelia, is supposed to be American. And she gets so into like trying to make everybody sound Scottish that she makes her character, the doctor, say things that are Scottish rather than saying them like an American person would. And these aren't things that you would say when you've only been in Scotland for 3 months. Okay, so I can't really think of an example right now, but there's a few things like that that kind of jumped out at me. And then the other thing, which kind of just bugs me as a reader, and I said this in my review of the first book too, is whether it's the writing or the editing, I don't know, or a combination of both, but 99% of this book is dialogue, and it's fairly poorly written / edited. I read a lot of books where a lot of the book is dialogue, and there's a correct way to type, print a lot of dialogue, lots of conversation, and this book does not do it correctly. So what happens is there's a lot of times where it's a conversation and you can't figure out who's speaking. You know, it's somebody talking, somebody talking, somebody talking, somebody talking. But the way it's printed in here, you lose track of who's talking. Or it's like they forget to tell you who's talking. It's just like constant dialogue, and you're trying to go back and forth, but then sometimes like the indentation or the quotation marks or whatever aren't right, and so it gets all kind of muddled. So that's not anything about the plot or the story. That's about the writing or the editing. So I did comment on that in the first book too, and in my review of that first book, I said I hope that she improves the writing and or the editing, whatever has this issue by the second book. Well, I hate to say it, but it did not improve. That aspect of it did not improve from the first book to the second book. However, I do think that the story was better in this book than it was in the first book. So I liked this one a little bit more than I liked An American in Scotland. And I am eagerly looking forward to reading Death at a Scottish Christmas yet before the end of the year. But again, I don't think I would give this more than 3.5 stars. I liked it, but because of the not so tidy writing and editing, and also because of some of the unrealistic aspects of some of the stuff that happens in the book, I don't think I'd go so far as to give it a 4 or 5. But again, that's not because she doesn't have good ideas, it's just kind of the implementation of it. So that was my review of Death at a Scottish Wedding. Good one to read in late fall, early winter. I give it 3.5 stars. I would recommend it, but you definitely would probably want to read the first book before you read this one, because it's pretty much a straight continuation from where the first one left off. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you soon.